SCP-682 versus the Gate Guardian. Can the giant warrior with a sword hotter than the sun finally kill the hard-to-destroy reptile? When SCP-682 was brought in to hopefully meet its ultimate destruction at the gate the Guardian guards, it quipped,
"Is this meant to be the garden? This is not the garden. The garden is far west of here."
When the Gate Guardian struck 682, it was grievously wounded, with only a single leg left. As it regenerated, it snarled at the Gate Guardian, saying,
"Die. You command me to die. Oh, wouldn't we all like that? But this is my curse for suggesting the fruit."
It struck again, and before passing out from its injuries, 682 said,
"This is not the garden, and you are not Uriel, pretender."
SCP-682 versus SCP-702. Who would win? The hard-to-destroy reptile or the gaseous living embodiment of the trade offer meme? Let's find out. When the gaseous entity inside SCP-702 suddenly appeared, the researchers offered SCP-682 to it as a gift. 702 briefly considered the offer for around 13 minutes before disappearing with the monster, leaving a cage with a parakeet in it in return. 702 later returned 682 after it ate several other curious items in its vast collection, considering it to be more trouble than it's worth. Something the Foundation can definitely relate to. The parakeet is still kept in Dr. Quatter's office. SCP-682 versus SCP-507. The hard-to-destroy reptile versus the reluctant dimension hopper. Could this unlikely hero finally be the one who gets rid of this cantankerous, unkillable beast? SCP-682 was heavily injured to the point of being immobilized, and SCP-507 was tied to its leg, in hopes of teleporting it away. Eventually, both creatures blipped out of existence. 63 hours later, 507 returned, tied to a creature with large fangs and vestigial wings but was otherwise identical to SCP-682. 507 had a note attached to his chest reading,
"Dear Universe 5802 Sigma Blue Romeo, it's your problem now, suckers."
In an attempt to finally get rid of SCP-682, the hard-to-destroy reptile, the SCP Foundation considered leaving it inside SCP-3008, the infinite IKEA, and just letting it be their problem for a change. How do you think it worked out? The Foundation sealed 682 into a box and sent it inside of 3008 with an unmanned drone. There was no response for 24 hours, at which point 18 instances of the malformed IKEA staff exited the building, each one carrying a large box stamped with an IKEA logo. They set these on the ground and then headed back inside. Inside each of these boxes was a living part of SCP-682, and like all things that come out of an IKEA box, 682 had trouble correctly putting itself back together. Thankfully, this granted the Foundation time to re-establish containment before SCP-682 had the chance to properly regenerate. SCP-682 versus SCP-536. The hard-to-destroy reptile seems to ignore the laws of physics most of the time, but how will he fare when the Foundation uses the SCP-536 chamber to manipulate the laws of physics around it? SCP-682's containment tank was moved into the 536 chamber. The speed of light, fundamental charge, and nuclear force were increased progressively over time. The chamber was utterly annihilated in seconds, but even when the process was done and 682 was reduced to 1% of its normal size, it was still alive. One of the researchers lost it from the frustration and began turning all the dials to torture the creature. He was removed from the cross-testing room, but was later forgiven for his indiscretions, with his supervisor noting that he would have done the same, seeing as, at times, 682 seemed almost like it enjoyed the process. SCP-682 versus SCP-162. The hard-to-destroy reptile was brought in front of the nightmarish contraption known as the Ball of Sharp, a malevolent ball of sharp objects that draws its victims in and tears them apart. 682 screamed profanities as it was brought before the ball. It then extended its deadly hooks, tearing off one of 682's forelimbs and its bottom jaw after a violent struggle. That's when 682 broke containment, dragging 162 along with it and using it to slaughter 11 different members of personnel, as well as injuring nearly 90 others. 2 additional deaths were caused during the recovery, and the researchers who had organized the cross-test were all given a disciplinary. SCP-682 vs. SCP-826. These magical dragon bookends can really bring fiction to life, but could they make the dream of killing SCP-682 a reality? A short story written by a researcher entitled "The Generally Nice, Friendly Thing That Can and Will Kill SCP-682 Permanently If It So Much As Spots That Damn Lizard," which we can imagine was very cathartic to write, was placed between the bookends. A D-Class on a motorcycle lured SCP-682 into this new fantasy world to fight the Generally Nice, Friendly Thing, and an epic battle between the two unfolded. However, when the battle came to an end, 682 lived, and the Thing had been torn apart. When it was returned to its containment chamber, the title of the book had become "The Generally Nice, Friendly Thing That Tried to Kill SCP-682 Permanently But Failed," with almost 200 extra pages detailing the epic but ultimately fruitless battle. SCP-682 vs. Dr. Bright. Could this battle of the immortals finally result in one of their lives coming to an end? Let's find out. The plan was to get SCP-682 to ingest Dr. Bright's SCP-963 medallion, erasing the beast's consciousness and replacing it with the good doctor's. From there, it would hopefully be a little more cooperative with attempts to kill it. But it didn't quite work out like that. Dr. Bright's consciousness was at war with the monsters inside its body after eating the medallion. On the outside, 682 grew giant claws and tunneled out of the chamber, where it ate the feet of one researcher, Dr. Samet. Thankfully, Dr. Bright was able to escape with his life and inhabit a new human body, but fragments of his consciousness were left in 682's malicious brain. The Foundation once tried to kill SCP-682, the hard-to-destroy reptile, with SCP-272, an old iron nail. This anomalous nail can kill its victims in a number of ways. The nail binds a victim's shadow to the ground, indirectly binding the victim itself as well by doing so. If the shadow is displaced due to changes in light source, the victim is flung and contorted in the same direction the shadow has moved. If the victim tries to destroy the nail, they will surely die. After the Foundation intentionally made the lights in 682's chambers strobe on and off from various directions, causing the reptile to be mutilated by being hurled around the room, its body began producing an extremely powerful light source, eliminating its own shadow and keeping it safe. The light was so bright that when D-Classes entered the chamber to remove the nail, despite wearing eye protection, they were afflicted with permanent retinal damage. And of course, in the end, SCP-682 was just fine. The cross-test between SCP-682 and SCP-173 with high-precision blades was a complete disaster. Organized by Dr. Shenron, the two iconic monsters were brought into a test chamber and the blades were deployed, cutting both of them into pieces. Two D-Classes were sent in when the vacuum system failed and were killed by SCP-682's blobs of flesh and the newly reformed SCP-173. At this point, the battle began, and 173 attacked the different blobs of 682 flesh. Some blobs fought back, while others reformed into a smaller version of 682 which stared at 173. Just like in the original test, a sniper shot out the eyes of this smaller 682, leading 173 to snap its neck. It then regenerated and stared at 173 for 17 hours before the test was finally ended. When 173 was taken back to its cell, there was a power failure in the hallway leading to a site-wide containment breach and many deaths. In one particularly exciting cross-test, the Foundation set SCP-682, the infamous hard-to-destroy reptile, against SCP-204, a cloud of deadly, all-consuming nanites bonded to a small child for the purposes of protecting them. As SCP-682 naturally attacked the child, the nanites sprung into action, forming the shape of a huge warrior with an axe and shield. The battle was intense, but amazingly, despite taking tremendous damage itself, the SCP-204 warrior kicked the stuffing out of SCP-682. As is expected of SCP-204, its nanites began feeding on SCP-682's immobilized body. But surprise, surprise, SCP-682 started regenerating faster than the nanites could eat it. It then began to attack SCP-204 once again. The Foundation tranquilized both parties and hosed SCP-682 with hydrochloric acid before returning them both to their chambers. All anomalies contained, no children harmed. In one cross-test, the hard-to-destroy reptile SCP-682 was made to face off against SCP-689, the terrifying haunter in the dark, a statue that can induce death in anyone who looks at it and then stops paying attention. The statue was placed in 682's chamber, and the lights were turned off for 5 minutes. When the lights were turned back on, 682 laid motionless in a pile of dark gray goo. When a D-Class was sent in to confirm the kill, 682 suddenly rose back up to its feet and devoured him in an instant, 2 swift chomps with its razor-sharp teeth, and the D-Class was history. It seems that 682 doesn't fit the same definition of alive as us humans, and as a result was unaffected by the Haunter in the dark. Frighteningly, 682 was also smart enough to intuit 689's anomalous ability, and use this knowledge to play dead and attempt escape. SCP-682 versus SCP-017. Could the Shadow Person be up to the task of finally consigning the hard-to-destroy reptile to eternal darkness? Let's find out. The Shadow Person is a small figure, roughly the size and shape of a human child, with the ability to absorb other entities and make them disappear by simply coming into contact with their shadows. It consumed a tissue sample from SCP-682 with no issues, so the test proceeded. However, during the full test, SCP-682 roared in a horrible rage, causing SCP-017 to stumble and retreat back to the corner of the cell. It refused to come near SCP-682. To this day, it's unclear whether the sound hurt 017 or merely frightened it. SCP-682 versus SCP-743. Could the world's most terrifying chocolate fountain, filled with an endless supply of omnivorous insects, finally be the thing to fell the hard-to-destroy reptile? Initially, there seemed to be hope. Exactly as the Foundation intended, 682 consumed some of the delicious chocolate, marking it for death by the nightmarish creatures lurking within. The swarm soon burst from the fountain and began attacking and devouring SCP-682. The creatures consumed 21% of 682's mass before the monster finally fought back. It evolved a long anteater-like tongue that it used to catch and eat many of the insects. The insects and 682 fed off of each other for days, and after the two were separated, having consumed 743's chocolate appeared to have temporarily given 682 heightened regenerative abilities. After observing this, the researchers concluded that the two anomalies should never be brought into contact again. SCP-682 versus SCP-3108. The hard-to-destroy reptile may treat all regular firearms like mere annoyances, but could the legendary nerfing gun take the monster down a peg or two? The nerfing gun has the power to turn anything it shoots into a worse version of itself. A D-Class was ordered to shoot 682 with it, and after missing 6 times due to fear, he landed the lucky 7th shot. But it wasn't so lucky. 682 became larger, stronger, and developed the ability to explode and reconstitute itself immediately as an offensive weapon. It breached containment and killed many members of personnel. Researcher Westron theorized that 682 became a more dangerous version of itself because a weaker, more docile version of 682 would be considered a net positive by the SCP Foundation, and therefore wouldn't technically be making it worse. That's one dangerous technicality. SCP-682 versus SCP-1933. Who would win? A huge hyper-intelligent lizard monster who can not only adapt to almost any attacks but also give them back, or a fat drunk guy dressed as Santa with Irish cream for blood. Though, to be fair, this Irish cream will also turn your blood into Irish cream and kill you. Foundation researchers siphoned off 200 gallons and fed it to SCP-682. 682 apparently really enjoyed this because it drank literally all of it, even becoming intoxicated and collapsing onto the ground, vocalizing loudly. Researchers hoped this fluid was wreaking havoc on 682's internals, but instead it vomited up huge quantities of this anomalous Irish cream, turning the walls of its cell into Irish cream and subsequently escaping to go on another deadly rampage. Happy holidays, I guess. SCP-682 versus SCP-063. The hard-to-destroy reptile faced the ultimate weapon, a toothbrush known as the world's best toothbrush, which can cleave through any physical matter. The Foundation used a robotic arm to attack 682 with a toothbrush, scrubbing out 20% of its body before it began regenerating. However, the regenerated matter seemed to be immune to 063, and 682 then attacked and destroyed the robotic arm. 063 scrubbed its way through the ground and out of the containment chamber. 682 grew a long prehensile arm that slithered down through the hole and killed 2 researchers. 063 was later covered without incident. Delegating a high-priority task to a person who only delivers a bare minimum style of work ethic otherwise will probably result in the task not getting done. The Foundation tried to snuff out SCP-682 with the help of SCP-2599, formerly known as Xena Cho, a woman of Korean descent who will carry out any order you give her, but only around halfway. That's why the Foundation ordered her to attack 682 until it was 200% dead, so even if she only did her task by halves, it would still be 100% 100% dead. By all accounts, she was actually doing a pretty solid job, horrifically mutilating the creature to the point of near death when it suddenly yelled,
"Kill me, you sack of organs! Do it!"
And that order seemingly confused her, seeing as only going halfway on killing the creature was something she'd already done. She remained motionless in the test chamber until she was physically removed, and later attempts to use her in 682's termination were fruitless. SCP-682 versus SCP-3660. When the SCP Foundation tested SCP-3660, the Zoo Zipper, a zipper that hollows creatures out and turns their insides into an animal, against SCP-682, the hard-to-destroy reptile, they were hoping to minimize the monster. The zipper was placed against the creature while it slept and left in place. Within 7 minutes, it did its thing, unzipping 682 and turning its body into dead rubber. Only a tiny gecko with 682's mind came out of the mess, confused and angry. Researcher Jettler entered the containment chamber and stomped on the 682 gecko. Sadly, this didn't work out. The 682 gecko suddenly became 682's regular size while still retaining its gecko appearance, and ate Researcher Jettler before breaching containment and killing several more people. 682 returned to its normal appearance over the next 2 weeks. Test failed. Mother Nature isn't something you should mess with, and the same goes with her daughter. This is SCP-682 versus SCP-166. This teenage nature sprite was put head-to-head with SCP-682, the hard-to-destroy reptile, in a test conducted by Dr. Tralmexoff. As SCP-682 attacked her, its body melted away into a patch of grass with flowers sprouting out of it. However, within 15 minutes it began regenerating as quickly as it had first melted, into a version of itself briefly covered in flowers and mushrooms. It even sprouted a whole tree out of its back, breaking the test chamber's ceiling. Dr. Tralmexoff may need to pay to get that repaired. Ready for this one? SCP-682 versus SCP-835 is one of the most horrifying SCP-682 cross-tests we have logged to date. That's right, we have paired the hard-to-destroy reptile with the disgusting nightmare known as SCP-835, a giant carnivorous coral polyp made from living human matter. When SCP-835 was released, the infectious abomination pulled SCP-682 into its massive gullet, dragging it down for a slow and painful digestion, surrounded by the intense pressure and screaming human faces of the beast's fleshy throat. What was eventually ejected was little more than 682's skeleton. However, over time, this skeleton regenerated into a horrific hybrid of SCP-682 and SCP-835. Covered in sticky tentacles, human faces spewing acid, and infectious spores that could turn others into monsters. It breached containment and killed many. The survivors had to be terminated to avoid SCP-835 contamination spreading further. In one cross-test, the Foundation thought SCP-682, the hard-to-destroy reptile, would bite off more than it could chew with SCP-807, a deadly plate from the Last Chance Diner. This plate makes any food placed on it extra delicious, but also makes them extra unhealthy. So unhealthy that people who eat its food tend to die of massive heart attacks. They use the plate to transmute 2 SCP-682 specials, a mix of 10 kilograms of rotten meat and sharpened bone splinters, 10 liters of rancid mayonnaise, 1 liter potassium cyanide, and 1 kilogram morphine hydrochloride, considered a 5-star course for our pal SCP-682, and fed it to the beast. At first it seemed immobile. Perhaps the monster had been bested, but when D-classes entered to check, the creature's skin ruptured in several areas, ejecting high-pressure jets of its own blood in every direction, killing them all. The reptile was completely fine afterward and eagerly ate a third 682 special. It's the Clash of the Titans. SCP-682, the hard-to-destroy reptile, versus SCP-096, the terrifying murderous Shy Guy. But who won this battle? Well, it was kind of a draw. Their battle lasted for 72 whole hours and ended in a brutal stalemate, with SCP-096 severely injured and huddled in one corner of the room, and 682 in the other, missing 85% of its original body mass. The creatures were both brought back to their chambers with relative ease. A fight like this can never happen again, because now, whenever 096 is brought too close to 682, it turns away, shrieks, and begins clawing at its own face. Who would win, the hard-to-destroy reptile or 9.15 million kilograms of bananas? This is SCP-682 versus SCP-3521. When SCP-682 was cross-tested with SCP-3521, a little yellow pill that makes bananas manifest in the stomach of those who eat them, the Foundation hoped to answer that question. 682 was tricked into eating the pill by hiding it inside the body of a dead cow, which was then fed to the monster. As time passed, an absurd number of bananas began to manifest in and around SCP-682, filling its containment chamber and then the entire facility. However, just when it seemed 682 was crushed under all that potassium, it began eating the bananas faster than they could be produced. And because bananas are each slightly naturally radioactive, eating that many gave SCP-682 the ability to fire a powerful radiation beam out of its mouth, until 3521's effects wore off. The craziest part? This all occurred within a 10-minute period. Guess you could say things went a little bananas there. In one cross-test, SCP-682, the hard-to-destroy reptile, was made to face off against SCP-1361, a giant aggressive mass of animal slurry that envelops and digests everything it touches, before briefly taking on their traits. Just over 1,000 kilograms of SCP-1361 was poured onto SCP-682, and it successfully enveloped the creature. The problem was that it then began taking on traits and a temperament incredibly similar to SCP-682. After developing legs, jaws, and other physical features similar to the reptile, it broke out of containment and killed 17 members of staff. After several failed attempts to stop the creature with small arms fire, it was finally destroyed by the aerial deployment of napalm. 682's skeletal carcass was retrieved from within and placed back in its chamber. It had regenerated back to perfect health within a mere 6 hours.